We need to tell our story. This is a country in West Africa that has been stable for a number of years. This is a country that's 7 hours away from New York, 5 hours away from Paris, 3 hours away from Brazil. So when it comes to trade and positioning and being a hub, what is aviation hub, what is trade hub, has tremendous potential. But I think what I told the government at the time, when the Macky Sall regime came in, we need to tell our story and brand ourselves as a destination that's stable, attractive for investors as well.
You're in the neighborhood with Cote d'Ivoire, with Ghana, with Nigeria. There's a lot of competition.
There's a lot of competition, but at the same time, the assets and the resources you have in Cote d'Ivoire and in Nigeria certainly are not the same what you have in Senegal. Both countries are very blessed. I think Senegal has a window of opportunity whereby when Cote d'Ivoire was unstable, where we could have certainly leveraged those 10 years and to reposition ourselves. And I think to a certain degree, that missed opportunity, we're paying for it, because now that Cote d'Ivoire is stable, a lot of people who moved from Cote d'Ivoire to Senegal are actually moving back to Cote d'Ivoire, and Senegal has not taken advantage of that.
Do you think culture and linguistics are at play here? There's often this talk of a divide between French-speaking Africa and English-speaking Africa, in a sense that former French colonies are just much too closely aligned with France to have opened themselves up to other possibilities, whether in America or Latin America or Asia or indeed the rest of Africa.
I feel that is changing though, because that must have probably applied, let's say, 20, 30 years ago, whereby unless you go to a French university in Paris, you're not going to be actually be put in a leadership position, in Francophone Africa. Today, look at myself, there are lots of other Senegalese, West Africans, I should say, went to school in China, went to school in the US, they haven't gone to school in France, and yet they came back and be either private sector leaders or political leaders. And that actually translates in the type of partnership and relationship that we build with the rest of the world. And not necessarily with France, but could be with China, could be with America and other parts of the world as well.
You mentioned the fact that Senegal has now found new resources, and obviously that's the oil and gas play. What would make Senegal more strategic than any of the other resource-rich countries?
Before we found the resources, the fundamentals were there. A stable country, the governance is relatively acceptable compared to a lot of countries in Africa. Transparency in the way we actually manage our resources was there before we found actually the oil resources and the gas, but also the fact that we have a lot of talented people in terms of skilled sort of workers. So the resources is just an added bonus.
You keep referencing human capital as a strength that the country has. Tell me what was so exciting about studying in China, and that's really changed your worldview in particular.
My interest was that I wanted to really see another part of the world whereby education is connected to actually the real problems you're going to be fixing when you come out of university. And one of the things I find fascinating about China is the fact that after my engineering degree, I was able to actually, I was employable in the sense that the places that I worked in within the government, but also was a nonprofit doing water resources management, were really a degree that allowed me to be actually pragmatic, practical, useful to my communities compared to, let's say, an education that I got that was just very theoretical, but not practical.
Obviously, in later years, you then became a minister in your government and a minister in charge of Chinese or Asian affairs. What do you make of people who say China is here to colonize Africa and not give back?
China knows what it wants from Africa. The question is, does Africa know what it wants from China? And what I meant by that, the Chinese, obviously, in growing the economy, they need commodities, they need resources, and they will go and find them wherever they can find them. But the question, when they come to a country like Senegal, what does Senegal want? Does it want sort of more technology, more resources, more partnership, and so on? So I think it's extremely important to make sure that when the Chinese come to your country, you direct them to actually where they will be actually adding value.
Why do you think other African countries battle with that?
Well, I think partly it's because, unfortunately, until today, many African leaders are very short-minded. They're not looking at a long-term sort of perspective of the country. In other words, I'm here for 2 terms. I'll make sure I get the resources that will actually keep me in power for the next 2 terms, and I'll kind of move on. If somebody is thinking about sort of long-term perspective, let's say an emerging economy for the next 20, 30 years, you'll be actually much more sensitive to making sure that relations with China does not just benefit you for your 2 terms, but also benefit the country as a whole for the next 30, 20 years. And I think that change of mindset, it's not just for the Chinese, it's vis-a-vis any partners that Africa is developing today, in making sure that our leaders think a little more long-term as opposed to short-term, because short-term gets us into trouble pretty much all over Africa.